Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty podcast, hosted by the Fantasyholics Podcast Network. Once again, coming at you live on the YouTube channel, Brant. I know that the likes and the subscribes are going up on that YouTube, so hopefully you get some of you guys in here to join us today. First and foremost, if anybody wants to send hate mail, rally with pitchforks and torches because these ugly faces are coming in much clearer, cleaner pictures. You can thank the man behind the scenes, Josh Rodriguez, for coming in much in the clutch with the new equipment for the two Fatboyz, as well as a couple other guys. We've got some more exciting projects coming your way, hopefully the end of July, where we're going to give a little redraft and some betting spins to the podcast world for the Fantasyholics page. So keep an eye out and an ear out for that coming at you very soon. Second of all, happy 4th of July weekend to everybody, those at home. Brant, to you as well. A weekend full of fireworks, grilling out, and some other stuff. So that leads me to my first question for you here, Brant, before you hit the intro. Tomorrow on 4th of July from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. is the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest. Okay, the first part of this question I have is, do we think Joey Chestnut repeats?
Yes.
Okay, I agree. The second part of the question is, do you think between the two of us, whatever he eats today or tomorrow in that 2-hour session, do you think we could finish that in the course of 24 hours, the two of us combined?
No.
Okay, I agree with that as well.
I got a big stomach, but I don't know how to rearrange that stuff like they do.
Dipping hot dogs in water and swallowing it without chewing. Not a talent I possess, Brant. Not a talent I possess. But nonetheless, happy 4th of July weekend to you guys. We're going to be playing a little fun game today, Brant. We thought we'd switch it up, bring something a little entertaining, and it should be that today. So without further ado, let's get the bibs on.
Let's eat.
Yeah. All right, Brant. So here we are. We're going to play a little Dynasty Startup ADP. Would you rather? So the idea behind the game, Brant, you're going to present a player by the numbers, a couple players by the numbers. Tell me what their current ADP is. And then from there, we will decide on which player we'd like, the other person would like, and then we'll reveal the names after we get a guess in, and we'll see if we stand pat on our choice or if we'd rather change things.
Okay.
So Brant, do you want to lead us off? You want to start us with your quarterback position?
Yeah, let me start you with my quarterback. The first one I got is a 29-year-old quarterback. He averaged 17.8 fantasy points per game last season. Those are in the games that he played in. He was the 95th player off the board. Not a whole lot changed in his offense. They did add another wide receiver 3, maybe 2, and a brand new OC. That was about the only change you saw with this team this offseason. They did lose their starting running back, but I don't think that really affected the quarterback too much. And then the other one lost his starting running back as well. I'm not sure how much that's going to affect him as a quarterback. He's 34 years old. He did 17.9 fantasy points per game, and he's going as the 147th player off the board. So almost, just almost 50 spots exactly. And like I said, they added a brand new wide receiver to their team, though, in the draft. And should be did lose their number 2, but they added somebody that's younger and more explosive in my mind. So do you go with player A or player B?
I think Brant, just due to age, I think I want player A.
Okay. All right. Well, player A is Dak Prescott. Like I said, he lost Zeke, which in my mind doesn't affect a whole lot of his pass game. Adding Tony Pollard could help out a little bit more. Player B was Kirk Cousins. This is a guy that you and me both have talked about and how he's a safe guy almost to own it. And he averaged, that 0.1 fantasy points per game, above Dak there. And with the new explosive weapon, I know the contract is going to be an issue there for Cousins coming up. But yeah, those were my two quarterbacks. When I broke down some numbers, I go, okay, these guys are really close and it's still 50 spots. So if you do miss out on Dak, though, just remember that later that's right where you're starting to see that little hump is where Dak is. And just remember, if you miss out on him and you want to, fill out the rest of your roster, this guy down here did average one more fantasy point, or not one more, a tenth of a fantasy point better than him per game. So it's not a whole lot of difference, and it's almost 50 players difference. So you're talking almost 5 different rounds.
Okay. All right, Brant. So I'm going to go to my quarterback position with you here. And these guys are being drafted about a round apart right now. The first one is quarterback. He's being taken as the 132nd pick off the board. His offense, it has a lot of unproven pass catchers, but a very good pass catching running back. Okay. Last year, he completed 317 passes for 3,205 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 708 rush yards, and another 7 touchdowns on the ground. All right. Player B has 2 wide receiver ones on his team. Not much turnover there. 259 completions last year, 3,548 pass yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, only 70 yards rushing for this player. So player A had a total of 22 touchdowns with his rushing numbers included. Player B had a total of 25 touchdowns, again, with 0 on the ground. So there's room for improvement there. Which would you rather have?
I think I'm going to go. What was the ADP of the second one?
I'm sorry. Excuse me. 1 second. He is going off the board at the 3rd pick in the 9th round,
okay.
Which is equivalent to the 112th player off the board. So there's about a round difference there between the guys.
Give me the second guy with the improvement and the 2 number 1 wideouts there.
Okay, Brent, you just chose Tua Tagovailoa over Daniel Jones.
I'm going to stick with that as long as Tua stays healthy. I absolutely love him. And as long as he stays healthy, that's the thing. So get the man some padded helmets and everything, and let's hope he doesn't turn into was that old Bully Ray from Varsity Blues, where the countdown's coming up on the scoreboard of how many more concussions he has.
So Brent, let me ask you though, with his health as a concern, do you take him still in a dynasty startup over Daniel Jones?
At that round, you're almost taking him as your second quarterback. So yes, I do.
Okay.
One of those guys I think are very good second quarterbacks. And now, mind you, we are talking 1 QB leagues, 12
team.
You got to throw that out there as we're talking about when they come off the board. But yeah, as that, I do still take him there.
Okay, fair enough. Let's get into the running backs, Brant.
All right, so we're going to running backs. 22 years old is my first one here. New addition to the backfield, brand new wide receiver weapon. They are in a run first offense, although the QB did really open it up last year. But this is where one of my biggest things is he averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game last year. But he only had 35 targets in the 15 games he played in. He had 35 targets in 15 games, but averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game. He's going off as the 55th player off the board. Now, we'll come down here, 2 years older, 24 years old. He's going as the 84th player off the board. So you're almost 30 spots different there. He was a backup last year. He's taken over the lead role this year. There's really not a whole lot behind him. And as a backup last year, he saw 58 targets as a backup, mind you. So he already saw 20 plus more targets as a backup. He finished RB 36 again in PPR leagues. He only averaged 8.5 fantasy points per game as a backup last year. So do you go with player A or do you go with player B here?
Well, Brant, I feel like I'm cheating because I know who these two players are, uh, but I still have to go with player A, even though I don't like the situation. You're getting ready to explain that to everybody else.
Yeah, player A is Kenneth Walker. And the situation coming from a Seahawks fan, I'm wearing my new Father's Day shirt here. It's got the Seattle Seahawks on the front. It's got the K9 and my last name on the back. My wife had it custom made for him. I'm absolutely a huge fan of him. But for fantasy wise, I'm not sure I'm sold on how it's going to go with the addition of JSN and the addition of Charbonnet. I just don't feel like he's even going to be involved in the passing game anywhere near that 35 targets. I don't even think he sees that next year. His explosive ability for 20 plus yard runs are absolutely phenomenal. We saw that his touchdown ability is amazing. So, but the second one here is a guy that I'm absolutely all on. And when we start talking about breakouts and why, this is one of the guys that I'll be talking about a lot. And I'm taking player B, even though he's 24 years old and 2 years older. And that's Rachaad White. There's nothing there to affect him. Really in the backfield right now. I know there's been talks of the addition of Cook and maybe Elliott and maybe bringing Fournette back. I know there's been talks of that, but right now there's not a whole lot behind White except for Keyshawn Vaughn, which I mean, what's he done really? But Rachaad White's a guy that I'm going to be taking a lot of. I'm getting a lot of stock in our new startup. I did take him, or I looked at him up, but obviously we had a Bucks fan who went a little higher. You ended up getting him. I think our Bucks fan took Keyshawn Vaughn, didn't he? But either way, there's not a whole lot there. Rachaad White's a guy that I absolutely love. And now I'm going to talk about some players around. So if you took Walker here, you could have been taking players like Lamar Jackson, Keenan Allen, Aaron Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Justin Fields right around the same area as Kenneth Walker. Or you wait, or you take one of those guys and you grab White, or if you are the one taking Walker, you're getting a chance for mostly wide receivers twos with Lockett and Kirk around that range. But there's also Montgomery and Kamara's right around Rachaad White's range too. So there are players to pivot in both spots there. And one of the main reasons is, like you said, you wanted player A. I would love to have player B. I'm not sold on Walker. I absolutely love him, but I'm not sold on the usage this year.
Let me say I'd much rather have Rachaad White than Kenneth Walker, but just based on the numbers alone, the numbers leaning in Kenneth Walker's favor. And when you throw out Justin Fields instead of Kenneth Walker and then pivoting and getting Rachaad White later, that sounds something I'd much rather do. So, okay, Brant, I'm going to take you through my running backs a little bit here. So my running backs here are a little bit lower guys. These are guys that you're going to get to fill out maybe your flex. Maybe if you go super wide receiver heavy, whatever the case may be, these are the guys you're going to get later to fill out your roster. So I've got the first running back. He's coming in at pick 66, 220 attempts last year, 939 yards rushing, 4.2 yards per carry, to go along with 4 rushing touchdowns, adding another 30 receptions, 165 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown through the air. So player A, Brant, finished with 5 total touchdowns. Player B is going as the 76th player off the board, so there's about a 10-spot difference between the two. Last season, he had 188 attempts, 786 yards rushing, 4.1 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns on the ground, and he added another 13 receptions for 117 yards, no touchdowns. So player B did finish with 2 more total touchdowns than player A, but a little bit less receiving work, Brant.
Okay. So they're 10-spot difference. 2 touchdowns. I think I'm going to have to take player A on this one here.
So you chose Dameon Pierce over Cam Akers, a guy who you and I are both very, very intrigued with, Brant. So obviously Cam Akers didn't play in all the games as much as Dameon Pierce did, but towards the end of the season, he really got it going. And the biggest crutch he had was, who was his quarterback for the second half of the season, Brant, for Cam Akers?
Baker Mayfield.
And what does Baker Mayfield not do?
Unfortunately, dump off passes.
Correct. So I think Cam Akers' numbers go up a little bit as far as receiving game, and his running game should be a little bit stronger as well, with Cooper Kupp hopefully back on the outside, and a healthy Matthew Stafford not having shoulder limitations. I take Cam Akers over Damian Pierce on a startup all day, especially when there's a 10-pick difference. So at that 66 spot, instead of drafting Damian Pierce, I'm probably able to add another wide receiver. Maybe I attack my tight end spot, and then I come back and get Cam Akers around later.
Yeah, I'm taking Cam Akers too. Now that you say the names, I'm not a fan of Pierce this year. I think Singletary cuts into a lot of his work. So yeah, I'm taking Cam Akers as well. So let's pivot over to the wide receivers here, and mine are a pair of teammates. So last year, this guy he's 27 years old, averaged 13.1 fantasy points per game. 2 touchdowns, 6.72 yards per target last year, saw 94 targets in 13 games. He's going as the 34th player off the board.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this guy, next guy, 25 years old, 2 years younger, averaged 13.4 fantasy points per game, 8 touchdowns, 8.9 yards per target, had 114 targets in a 17-game span, and is going 20 picks later at number 52 off the board. So like I said, this is a pair of teammates. One did see 17 games, one did see 13. And I'll go into a little more of a breakdown once you pick this, because if I start breaking it down right now, I'm going to give away the names real easy. I know you know them, but
I'm going player B, I think, honestly.
Player B is Brandon Ayuk. So player A is Deebo Samuel. And we talked about this a little bit earlier this week when we were talking about some redraft stuff. And Deebo, I don't trust in his numbers. His numbers went way down when Christian McCaffrey got there. I just don't. Deebo Samuel is a guy that is overvalued in my mind. I don't see how he can repeat his fantasy from 2 years ago. Brock Purdy looked early and often for Brandon Ayuk in the games they played. Brandon Ayuk actually outperformed Deebo in most games they played. He saw double-digit targets in any game that Deebo missed. And I don't believe Deebo, I'd have to go back through my notes, but I don't believe Deebo saw double-digit targets except for maybe twice after Christian McCaffrey got there. His rushing went way down. This is a 20-spot difference. Give me Brandon Ayuk all day. 20-spot difference. A little bit more fantasy points per game and 2 years younger. Give me Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, Brant. So for me here, obviously this is tough because I've been a Deebo fan for a few years now. But I do think it was Jimmy G that made Deebo Samuel what Deebo Samuel was. Then you factor in the addition of Christian McCaffrey, who's going to take a lot of what Deebo did away from Deebo. So yeah, I do think at this time it's Brandon Ayuk, unfortunately. But again, Deebo was a lot of fun. Why Deebo was Deebo, but obviously I think Brandon Ayuk's the one to own in that wide receiver pairing now.
Yeah. Now, before you jump into your wide receivers, if you pivot away from Deebo, and this is another reason I'm pivoting away from Deebo, you're getting guys like Chris Olave, DK Metcalf, and Christian Watson. All that youth right there, too, with the chance of, higher upside in my mind. Now, if you pivot away, you're going Chris Godwin, Hollywood Brown, and Jahan Dotson over around Brandon Ayuk's ADP. So that's even easier for me. I pivot. I'm going to grab Chris Olave over Deebo, and then I'm going to go back and grab Ayuk because of those 3 names I mentioned. Ayuk, I actually like over all 3 of those names.
Yeah, I take Ayuk over all those guys, and actually it's the opposite with Deebo. I take every one of the guys you mentioned over Deebo, including Christian Watson. But I am a touch higher on him than the rest of the world, I think, at this point. So, but yeah, that's not even a close comparison for me. I'd be very upset if I ended up with Deebo Samuel out of those 5 names there. So, all right, Brant. So the 2 wide receivers I'm going to come at you with, both of them had quarterback struggles last year. And I'm not sure either one of them they both get a new quarterback this year, but I'm not sure either one of them upgraded quarterbacks this year. All right. So the first one is coming in at pick 34. All right. He had 117 targets last year, 72 receptions, 866 yards, 12 yards per catch to go along with 4 touchdowns. All right, that's player A. Player B is going off the board at the 54th pick. Had 118 targets, 63 receptions, 888 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, and he did have 14.1 yards per catch. So again, one player had more touchdowns, the other had more receptions. Player A or player B, Brant?
PPR league, I'm going with the one with the more receptions. You said that was player A, correct?
Player A had 9 more receptions.
Yeah. So PPR, I think I'm going with that. Standard, I would obviously pivot away to player B, but PPR league, which most of us are in, I'm going after player A.
Okay, Brant, you just chose Drake London over DJ Moore.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So again, you got DJ Moore, who played with that dumpster fire of an offense in Carolina that saw PJ Walker, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, all those guys last year. Whereas Drake London was hamstrung by Marcus Mariota most of the season. So both of these guys do get new week 1 starters this year in Justin Fields for DJ Moore and Desmond Ridder for Drake London. I too would lean Drake London here, but it's a 20 pick difference. I didn't know with the 20 picks between the two of them, if that would sway you off of Drake London instead of DJ Moore.
So what you're talking, it really did get close to swaying me. I do like DJ Moore this year. I just don't know about his upside. But at PPR format, I'm going to go with the guy that had the more targets and more receptions. And like you said, I think that in the hindsight, Drake London actually does get an upgrade in QB accuracy. DJ Moore, I think, gets a little bit upgrade. Maybe you put all those guys together and they might have about the same accuracy as Justin Fields. I know Fields hasn't been the greatest, but yeah, I think I'd take Drake London even with that 20 pick difference.
Okay. All right, Brent, let's move on to the tight end position. This is one I'm excited about here.
This one I was not excited about. It was really hard to do. So my first one here, my first one here is player A, and he is 30 years old, and he played in 9 games last year, mind you, so he did have some injury trouble. He has finished as a top 5 tight end twice in his career. He averaged 9.8 fantasy points per game. He's at a new team. He is with the new team that he's in. They do not have a true number 1 wide receiver. Struggling quarterback. Prior to last year, his new quarterback did start coming on strong last year. And he's going as the 80th player off the board. Now, mind you, I did flip these back. So my player A is actually the lower ADP or higher ADP. Sorry. So my number 2 player B is 27 years old. They added 2 more wide receivers to the team on a offense that has a struggle passing quarterback, and they are a run first offense, and he's going as the 30th player off the board. So he's going relatively early for a tight end. He's, like I said, he's 27 years old. He did finish as a tight end 4 last year. He averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game in 15 games, but they really did not have a true wide receiver on their team at all last year. And so he was really the only target there. So player A is on a new team. He's going the 80th overall, and player B is going 30th overall. And they added a lot more weapons there.
Let me take player A just on the ADP difference alone.
Player A, now mind you, it is a 3-year difference, 30 to 27. Player A is Darren Waller. And this is a guy that I absolutely have huge expectations for coming into this year. Like I said, he's had plenty of time, and we've seen him do excellent, and I expect that offense to really open him up back to his old ways. Player B was Mark Andrews. And like we've talked about multiple times, is the addition of those wide receivers and a quarterback that doesn't really throw the ball a whole lot. I think you have to go player B here. I think Mark Andrews is a guy that I'm extremely fading this year and fading him quite hard.
Brant, let me say this when it comes to the tight end position. All right. My 2 cents on this is, even in a dynasty startup ADP today, if I can't get Travis Kelce, all right, I'm not sure I want to take a tight end before I fill out the rest of my starting lineup, just because the value from, say, tight end 5 to tight end 12 are really quite similar, honestly. And when you start throwing out the names, it's really just a crapshoot of which tight end is going to burst. So I'd almost rather punt on the position and grab somebody that's, say, an established tight end that's maybe Darren Waller's age, somebody like Darren Waller, for example, and then later in the draft grab a Sam Laporta, a Dalton Kincaid, something like that, to try to maybe hit for the future as well. But again, if you don't get Travis Kelce in this, Brant, your tight end isn't making a big difference when you play anybody else each week. They're going to be interchangeable. Yes, Mark Andrews is capable of having a 25-point week, okay, but so is Cole Kmet, or so is Kyle Pitts if he ever plays a game. But they're not capable of doing that week in and week out, much in the way of Travis Kelce. So again, if I don't get Travis Kelce, I'm not taking a tight end, I don't think, in the top 10 rounds. It would really have to be a force your hand, the run's going, and I'm getting scared of what's left for me to do it. Like I don't want to start the season with Gerald Everett as my starting tight end, I guess. So I would do it before the run got that bad. But this is just a position that it's hard. Unless it's a tight end premium, Brant, I just don't put a lot of stock in the tight ends.
Absolutely, I feel the same way. Is pivot off tight ends. I think like you said, Kelce, maybe Pitts. You could see me maybe pivot early for, just because his youth and the offense is on the upswing. But really, those are the only two names that you're going to see me probably leap for in a draft prior to later rounds.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right, Brant. I'm really excited to come at you with my tight ends because I'm wanting to play Stump the Chump with you here. Let me see if I can catch you up on this. I don't know if I will or not. All right. First player is coming off the board at the 71st overall pick. Player A. Player A had 69 targets, 55 receptions, 702 yards, 10.1 yards per catch to go along with 3 touchdowns. Player B is coming off the board at pick 88. Okay, so 17 picks between the two of them. 98 targets last year on his offense, 63 receptions, so 6 less receptions than player A had target-wise, 732 yards receiving, 11.6 yards per catch, 2 touchdowns.
Really, in both those tight ends, I'm not a big fan of. Obviously, the red zone work isn't
Yes,
the
you
greatest.
are. Yes,
Red zone work is just very scary with those. I have a feeling player B. I think I know who it is. I'm going to go. I think it's David Njoku is player B.
Okay. All right.
I could be wrong, but I think it's just because of waiting on tight ends. I think I go with player B on this one.
Okay, let me tell you, both of these tight ends last year finished as tight end ones in a 12-man league, Brant. Does that change anything for you?
No, I still think that because of the later ADP, I think I'm taking tight end 2 or tight end B.
I agree with you. Tight end B was the right pick. Last year, he finished as tight end 8. Player B was tight end 12. And I also would pick player B over player A. Brant, you just chose Pat Freiermuth over Dallas Goedert.
Wow. Okay. Well, Goddard took me to a championship. I guess it's time to pivot away from him. Now we got to mention that Goddard did miss some time last year.
He did.
But there's a lot of weapons there, and they added another pass catching option with DeAndre Swift. Penny was okay in the pass game. Gainwell's still there. Devonta's still there. AJ Brown's still there. And Jalen Hurts' legs are still there. So Goddard's a guy that could see, about the same stats next year, even though he missed time last year. I'm definitely happy with taking Pat Freiermuth.
Okay. I agree, Brant. Again, I think Kenny Pickett takes another step forward. Pat Freiermuth is going to be a huge red zone threat this year, I believe. I think Pat Freiermuth's a tight end you could draft in a dynasty startup and be pretty comfortable with your tight end for a few years to come here. So Before I get into my extra one, Brant, because I did have one, I could not help myself. Do you have any that you want to discuss?
I don't have any more. Those were the main four that I went with. It took me a little time to try to find a good ADPs around, so I kind of limited myself on this one. Unfortunately,
Okay.
there's probably other names out there that I could have done, but I kind of limited myself.
Hey, it's 4th of July weekend, right? We're fireworks, pool, barbecuing. You ain't got to make up excuses here. It's all good in the hood. We know you put in the work. All right, Brant, I'm coming at you. This is a wide receiver position. These dogs are both top heavy dogs. All right. These are guys that you may get as your wide receiver one in a dynasty startup. All right. So player A is coming in at pick 13. Okay. 1-3. Last year, 146 targets. 106 receptions, 1,161 yards receiving, 10.9 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns. Player B coming in at pick 19, so 6 picks in between these guys. 147 targets last year, so one more target. Only 88 receptions. Excuse me, 88 receptions. So 18 less receptions than player A. 1,103 yards, 13.2 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns. So, Brant, player A beat player B in everything except for yards per catch and targets. So, essentially, player A beat player B in every fantasy meaning aspect last year. Which player do you choose?
Both still have the same quarterback this year.
Negative. Player B is getting a new quarterback. I don't want to give too much away, but he's getting a new quarterback.
Okay. Well, though both the names are wrong, I thought player A you were going to say was getting a new quarterback. I thought it was Adams and DK, but apparently I'm wrong there. Give me player A just because of the quarterback situation staying the same.
Okay, I will tell you this, Brant, before I give out names. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these players, but I think we will both agree we'd much rather own player B in a dynasty. Player A that you chose, Brant, Amon-Ra St. Brown, finished as the wide receiver 7 last year. Very good numbers. Player B, Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets playing with Aaron Rodgers this year. Do you change your answer?
I did. As much as I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, as much as he's helped me carry me last year after I got him for a steal and a trade in our dynasty league, I think I'd rather own Garrett Wilson, even though I could own both of these guys in our dynasty league, but I definitely made a bad mistake on trying to irritate somebody that I love to irritate. But yeah, I think I'm going to take Garrett Wilson over Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Listen, Brant, you and I are in the minority here. Most of America still would rather have Amon-Ra St. Brown than Garrett Wilson. I think this is the last year you see that happen, just because it's relatively unproven with the Jets. But I for sure am much, much, much higher on Garrett Wilson long-term than I am Amon-Ra St. Brown. But they're both good players. Obviously, they're both capable of putting up really good numbers. Jameson Williams possibly emerging in the long run kind of scares me a little bit. And Aaron Rodgers is only a short-term gap answer for the New York Jets. So Zach Wilson's going to have to improve for this to stay the same. But I do think Garrett Wilson is trending into that wide receiver 3 number behind Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase in my neighborhood. And again, the only reason I put that there, Brant, is they're going off the board wide receiver 7 and 8 right now, or 6 and 7. I'm sorry, 6 and 7 in dynasty startups. So they're right next to each other. It caught my eye. I was like, man, I can't be the only one who thinks I'd rather have Garrett Wilson here. But yeah, the numbers for Amon-Ra, until I sat down and wrote them on paper, they really surprised me.
I just seeing St. Brown go that early is crazy in my mind, because in my mind he should be going. I know his numbers are there, but he should be going in my mind a little bit later, just because I mean you talk about Rodgers being a short-term answer. I think the quarterback Goff there is a short-term answer too. I know we've already seen this short-term. They did draft Hooker, and like you said, Williams is there. Yeah, I'm definitely sticking. I think Garrett Wilson will be making a huge name for him this year. And the Jets have been on the upswing lately, and I think they're doing all the right things right now.
So I was right initially. They were going off the board at 7 and 8. So in front of the two of them, you have Stephon Diggs at 6, Jalen Waddle 5, CeeDee Lamb 4, AJ Brown 3, Jamar Chase 2, Justin Jefferson 1. The only one I really question being up inside that top 5 is Jalen Waddle. I'm not quite sure with Tyreek Hill there that I fall in line with that, but the rest of those names I could see being in front of those guys for this year. But next year, again, like I said, I do think Garrett Wilson flies up that board, Brant.
Yeah, I think Diggs and Water are the two names that maybe I would put behind Wilson. Like you hit the Waddle on the head. Diggs, I think, is that Bills offense. I don't want to say it scares me. It's very explosive, but the way that they play sometimes scares me. I know Diggs had some down games last year, and like I said, you and me have both talked about this. We think Garrett Wilson ends up being a top 5 wideout this year. And going as what'd you say, the 19th player off the board for him?
Yes.
That's in my mind is almost a steal for a lot of players. You're looking at him possibly being your wide receiver too, and that's you get Diggs and Wilson, and you pair those two together, you're looking at 2 top 5 wide receivers.
Imagine going in your first round and taking Justin Jefferson and somehow getting Garrett Wilson in the second round. Mm-hmm. I mean, my goodness, Brant, talk about being set up for the future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jefferson or Chase there, and adding Garrett Wilson. You're talking, like you and me have said, top five wide receivers. You have 2 of them for multiple years to come in my mind.
Absolutely. All right, Brent. So I think that wraps up the ADP Would You Rathers. Before we get out of here, I do want to say, those of you who are lighting off fireworks this weekend, do it responsibly, right, Brent? It's hard to cut a steak when you're missing digits. So just, be responsible this weekend. It all goes back to being able to eat the food that we need to nourish our bodies. Or maybe that's just for me that it goes back to food. I don't know, but be safe, everybody. Have a happy 4th of July weekend, Brant, and the rest of America.
Absolutely. And as always, stay hungry
and stay fat, my friends.